Meditation 3. Focus on the spine with Hong So Mantra. Visualize your breath going up and down the spine with Hong and So. No control, your breath is free. You can go ahead in this way for some minutes. Then, when the breath is so short that the procedure is on the verge of evaporating into nothing, try to feel this short breath happening in each chakra. One short, almost invisible, but complete breath happens in Muladhara and is blended with the soothing chant of Hong and So. This breath is like a peaceful vibration in a silent mind. Then place your concentration on the second chakra. Another breath happens there, then another breath happens in the third chakra, and so on, up and down along the spine, until there is no more breath, only Hong So like a micro movement in each chakra. If you practice in this way, a virtuous circle between this growing calmness and the reduced necessity of oxygen will start. This leads to an extraordinary result even for those who deem they are only clumsy beginners. In time, this will lead you to enjoy a perfect breathless state. Then you will realize the truth contained in the words of a great disciple of P.Y. He said, "I have learned to live by inner joy." The disciple was J.J. Lin, called Rajarsi Jankananda. Meditation 4. Om meditation technique, closing the ears. Contrarily to what some students think, this technique works. But it works only if you practice as it is taught, in the recommended position, with arm rest, closing one's ears with your hands, no ear plugs, while mental chanting Om innumerable times, with total commitment to internal listening without ever discouraging. Often your hands seem paralyzed. You won't sense them anymore. This is the moment to keep on, undeterred. Usually you do not notice the exact instant when you start listening to the internal sounds. At a certain point you notice you are already listening to them since some time. The internal sounds don't appear when the mind is active thinking, but only when it is perfectly void, even void of the eye consciousness, void of the thought you are doing a certain practice. When you reach a total void, to some the state seems having entered the sleep state. When the repetition of the mantra has created a transformation of your state of consciousness, you will be surprised by a certain indefinite internal sound. You will sweetly become aware of them. Great experiences ensue from this meditation technique. But it is necessary to devote to this technique the necessary time it requires. Its good effects disappear entirely when you operate the unhappy choice of practicing a greater number of Kriya breaths and devote to it no more than 10 minutes. Sometimes a wrong choice of a higher Kriya procedure, instead of cooperating with the process of calming the prana, produces the contrary effect and the whole magic of the meditation state is lost. One must understand that after the Om technique no other procedure should follow. There is a striking contradiction in the action of interrupting the listening of the internal sounds in order to practice any other procedure. 2. A rational plan to work with the higher Kriyas starting from P.Y.'s third Kriya. Facing the higher Kriyas was not an easy task. I received from the organization an outwardly simple meditation technique called second Kriya. It was not based on some form of pranayam but on the listening to the internal sounds. My first impression was that this procedure was the evolution of the Om meditation technique, part of P.Y.'s Yogoda system. I think that it is correct to call it technique to locate, physically and astrally, the seat of each chakra. Surely the reason of my failure was that this procedure happens in the best of the ways when the breath is subtle, when the meditative phase is already begun, rather very deep. As I have explained, it was then that I asked to my organization a live seminar on this practice and the response was negative. My state of disappointment and confusion came near to desperation. In the course of the years, I do not think I have ever found a Kriyaban that told me he was practicing regularly this technique. Some friends gave up completely the higher Kriyas, others practiced occasionally only the third Kriya. The fact that this technique is noticeably different from the second Kriya as handed down by the tradition created bewilderment in the heart and mind of some students. The hypothesis that P.Y. had received this technique by Swami Keblananda, his Sanskrit teacher, seems plausible. Be that as it may, there were students who, only for this reason, felt deceived and dropped it without fully testing its potentialities. The idea that their guru had deceived them by not giving the true second kriya originated a terrible conflict, I would say a true catastrophe from the emotive point of view, in their soul. Now I know that this conflict could have been mitigated by explaining that the traditional second kriya is PY's third kriya technique. Driven by this situation, but not only because of it, some friends of mine visited a couple PY's ashrams in India and contacted also some Kriya Acharya outside the organization. What happened is very difficult to summarize. Many returned with their mind full of contradictory information. They told what seemed a visible exaggeration. The higher Kriyas, as they are practiced in PY's ashram, are completely different from what we practice through the correspondence course. I put my trust in a friend who lived every year for about 1 month in an Indian ashram who was officially linked with PY's main Kriya organization. Over the course of many years, he talked with me about his experience. He had received a great privilege to meet and talk different times with an old disciple of Swami Satyanandagiri, disciple of Sri Yukteswar. The old man, who often paid a visit to the ashram, did not give formal initiation to him, but encouraged him to follow faithfully PY's teachings. One day, talking about the higher kriyas, this disciple hinted at the procedure of thokar. My friend asked more details about this technique. The term thokar was found also in the literature about Lahiri Mahashaya's original kriya. The disciple said one thing that often comes back to me. Practicing thokar is like grasping a tiger for Q. He replied, you will receive immediately a great power, but one day the entire tiger will come to you, and perhaps you will not be able to hold all that power. He continued explaining that thokar was a procedure during which you give a strong stimulus to the Muladhara chakra. This technique should not be practiced outside of an ashram or without the direct guidance of an experienced kriyaban. He also said that PY had shared this procedure only with 6 direct disciples. My friend had a great respect for this person. When the old disciple left the body, my friend preferred to talk the bare minimum with the other persons in the ashram. So it was not easy to convince him to formally ask a revision of his kriya. But accepted. When he was back from India, I received him warmly. He said that the minister appointed for revision was surprised that he was requesting a check of his higher kriyas. This was quite uncommon. While listening from my friend a description of his second kriya, the minister was in trouble, being not able to pick out which technique my friend was describing. There was a moment of clear embarrassment. Then he recollected himself and gave a generic instruction about the movement of energy in the spine and on meditation in general. My friend had, however, the impression that the monk was talking about PY's third kriya. In that perspective, the words of the minister were perfect. Next day, the minister wanted to talk again with my friend. He apologized for having created some confusion. He said that when PY abandoned his body, it was a shock for the entire organization. So many things were not decided. The correspondence course was not entirely completed. Some parts would be reconsidered in the future. The key problem was that PY knew that it was not correct, not possible to share some delicate instruction through the correspondence course. He, the minister, said that perhaps he received something slightly different from what my friend received. He said that when people, who feel they are disciples of PY, are informed of those editorial difficulties, there should not be a problem.